others while one is speaking, okay? Isabella?
Okay, it's Tatiana now.
Okay. So just to settle, hello, Ivo. I'm not sure if I have the bio of everybody, but I can introduce Nina Siedler as an expert on blockchain, and Thibault as professor. Let me just see the result. Os alunos têm rapidamente aí no chat o resumo de cada o título deles, acadêmico. Otherwise, we can start. Nina is an expert on blockchain. How can I introduce you in a line, Nina? DWF, right?
In one line, yeah. Well, I try to shorten it down. Partner at DWF, an international law firm, and also a member of the board of a number of associations in the blockchain area. So INATBA, first of all, International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications, which had been initiated by the European Commission last year. And also some smaller association here in Germany and in Luxembourg. So deeply involved also in the policy area.
Okay, I'll do my best. I have your resume. Okay. And okay, Professor Ivo. Ivo is professor of UniCeub and a well-recognized lawyer here in the country.
That will suffice. That's kind enough.
Okay. And Professor Thibault, I know. So let's go. And Andres, Undersecretary for Competition Affairs. Okay. Okay, my friends, we shall go live. Just tell us.
Sorry, what's the question?
Avisa quando a gente estiver ao vivo, por favor.
Já estamos.
Okay. So good morning to all. Really honored today to share this panel on blockchain as antitrust code with very much well-known specialists and professors. I will not take longer to introduce them all. Starting from Professor Thibault Schrepel from the University of Utrech in Stanford. Dr. Nina Luisa Siedler. Nina is I will try to summarize her, huge resume. Nina is highly interested in new technology and advises fintech companies as well as blockchain ventures on financial regulatory questions and new governance structure. Nina is a 20 years experience partner in DWF law in Germany, and Nina is also part of the board of many institutions on fintechs, startups, and blockchain, like INATBA. She will talk a little bit more about INATBA when she has the word. We have also Professor Ivo Teixeira Gico Jr. Professor Ivo is a well-known academic and lawyer here in the country that we know for some years, right, Professor? And we also have the honor to have with us Dr. Andre Vilas Boas. Dr. Andre is our Undersecretary for Competition Affairs of the Ministry of Economy. And welcome, Andre. So we shall have an informal debate after 2 or 3 presentations. I mean 3 because maybe we will have another special guest to join this panel. Referred by Professor Thibault is Professor Marina from Nice University. Okay, so please, Professor Thibault, the word is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I know it's common practice to say that you are pleased to be invited in a conference, but I'm especially pleased, first of all, because we are friends and it's always good to work with friends. And also, I think the program you have organized is really mind-blowing. So thanks a lot for having me. And I very much look forward to the discussion today. We have 2 hours, generally speaking, blockchain, it's only 20 minutes, and we do have to explain what blockchain is, and that's it. So it's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to that. I will share my screen. I hope that it will work. So you should see my screen. Is that working? Yeah, great. So those are the two pillars that I want to discuss today. I want to insist on the concept of digital architecture and then to discuss how blockchain may fit with antitrust or competition law. But before I get started, I wanted to show you this. And the reason why is because I can actually give you two different types of talks. One, which is Dr. Jekyll, where I actually explain how blockchain could increase the common good. And the other one is Mr. Hyde, where I could actually focus my presentation on anti-competitive practices and explain how blockchain may imperil antitrust. Today, I've chosen to discuss the first, but of course, the two goes with one another. And I think that if we want blockchain to achieve something, we do also need to discuss the bad face of blockchain and illegal practices and to find a way to tackle those practices. So I will be going a bit back and forth, but still, I thought that I will be more positive than negative today. So that being said, entering the first pillar concerning digital infrastructures and institutions, coming from the field of competition law, this is something I have to say that, in my opinion, we do not see enough. We discuss lots of different subjects that I will show you in a minute. But when it comes to the infrastructure on top of which you can actually build something, whether those are new products, new services, new ways to organize societies, I feel like this is being ignored by a large majority of the community. And I'm worried that it will lead us to some mistakes. And so let me give you an example. Here's when we are not discussing infrastructures, here's what's happening. You may have read or definitely heard about Amazon antitrust paradox, which was published in 2017. If you've read the paper, which is 100 pages long, it will actually discuss practices engaged by Amazon in a very detailed manner. And I think this is indeed what we need to do in the field of antitrust, because when we apply antitrust, we do it practices after practices. And yet, on that basis of what I call the micro view of just looking at one practice at a time, the author of the paper is asking for some macro new measures to reform antitrust entirely and to take into account the structure of the market and all that. This is what's coming in Europe. The new competition tool, the DSA, the DMA, which will be announced in 1 week, but we pretty much know already the spirits of those two acts are pretty much in that vein of looking at the structure. And the reason for the European Commission to do that was to say that there are some anti-competitive practices. I'm not sure if the decorrelation between the two is a good idea. And here's also what's happening when you look at just one technology at a time without looking at infrastructure. In the field of antitrust, if you enter algorithm and antitrust in AIN Online or let's say Google Scholar, you will get to almost 50,000 articles published on the subject. So the least we can say is that we are not discussing those subjects. The subject of algorithm and antitrust is being discussed all the time. And to some degree, I understand why. If indeed algorithms are used by companies, we want to be able to apply antitrust to the practices using algorithm. And yet, if you read the literature, most of the time you will see that one algorithm could do something bad. So in the lab, we have some tests and we can show that algorithms can collude with one another. And on that basis, the solution is to regulate that algorithm. But it seems to me that if we do it this way with a micro view, we may miss the big picture and it will lead to some false positive or false negative. It feels a bit like talking about apps on a smartphone and saying, well, this app is doing this and that, and this is anti-competitive, without ever mentioning the ecosystem, which is the OS allowing the apps to function. So I think it's actually indeed dangerous to only talk about one technology or one practice at a time without putting some context on top of it. And so here's an infrastructure. And here's why, in my opinion, it's important to discuss infrastructures. You may have heard also about this book published by Lawrence Lessig from Harvard University, at the time I think Stanford University, entitled Code. It's freely accessible online. It is the best legal book I've ever read. This is a personal comment, of course, but I very, very much encourage you to read the book. I've put a link to chapter 7, which is mind-blowing in my opinion. In that chapter, Lawrence Lessig is making the point that everything we do, whether it is online or offline, is actually being managed by 4 different constraints. The first is the law. If something is illegal, most people won't do it. The second one is the market. If you can do something, but it's very expensive for you to do it, why would you do it? Unless you really want to, of course. The third are the norms. If I tell you you can do something, but this is seen by society as being very negative, most people won't do it. And the fourth is architecture. And this could be the architecture in the way we design a city. It would change the way the city allows citizens to behave, but it's also digital architectures. And for that reason, I think it's very important to, again, discuss those architectures. And I will soon be talking about blockchain, but the reason why I think it's important is that digital architecture will actually impact all of the technologies that will function on top of it. I've put 4 examples on the screen. One is algorithm. So if you put an algorithm on top of an architecture or another one, it could change the way the algorithm will function. Another one is AI. And of course, this is a subject that should be of interest to competition agencies. Robots, apparently they're coming. We've been hearing that for 30 years, but this time we've been told it's true. And the Internet of Things. And if you look at surveys, more than 80% of the companies involved in Internet of Things developments say that eventually they want to put their product and services on top of a blockchain. So I think this is very important. But if you take an even more macro view, in my opinion, digital architecture will also impact societies. And this, you could argue, is the story of the years 2000 to 2020, in which we've seen a battle between the law and tech companies. And the two are governing our lives. And of course, they are doing that in a way which sometimes creates some friction between the two. So here's in the middle society. On the left, I put what Lawrence Lessig called the East Coast Code. So that's coming from a US perspective, that's the code of the Congress, or it will be the same in any country. And the West Coast Code, which is the code of the Silicon Valley. And that, you could argue, has been the story of the last 20 years, right? First, we have the declaration of the independence of the cyberspace, in which the internet people at the time said, it's going to be great, we're going to be able to escape the rule of law. Then we know that it wasn't true actually, but then came big tech companies saying we do not care about the law. First, we put a product on the market and then we'll care about the law, which we now know is a mistake because the regulator can actually ask them to take the product out of the market. And so we go back and forth. And that's the story of two institutions or two infrastructures confronting one another. So the question is, okay, infrastructures are important, but then why should we be talking about blockchain? And I think there are two main reasons why you may want to dig a little bit into the field and the technology and understand what is blockchain and the impact on our societies. The first is the potential for blockchain. There are lots of numbers. This one, I think, is a great one. It was published by a trusted analytical company called Bain, in which they projected. So of course, it's just a projection and to some degree will be different in real life. But still, they projected that in 6 years from now, blockchain will increase the world trade by $1.1 trillion, knowing that today, world trade represents $16 trillion. So blockchain will create an increase of 7%. So it's huge. It means that blockchain will not only transform some transactions that we do already, but they will happen on the blockchain, but it also means that blockchain will allow some new transactions. And that, I think, is a good reason why we should care about this technology. And here's another reason. We should, I think, even more care about this technology, even more so because blockchain, you could argue, is an institution on its own. So I've put a definition to what is an institution. You have lots of definition, but I think this one is clear. Institutions are rules of the games. And of course, the state is one institution, so you will put some rules, but the technology could also be in institutions. There are lots of fascinating literature on the subject. I'll be more than happy to send it to you, including by Oliver Williamson. But let me just compare blockchain with a firm and a market for now. Some people say that blockchain is just a new market. It's just a new way to transact freely on the market. And I think this is not correct for two main reasons. The first is that if you are to transact using a blockchain, you will actually do so using more information that you can use being just on the market. On the market, if you've never made any business deal with someone else, the only thing is the price, right? You have to discover the price, and based on the price, you will infer the quality of the product or the service. It's not perfect, but it's the best you can do. On the blockchain, not only you have the price of the transaction, but also you can access all of the past transactions made by one person. And that is very, very much valuable information. What you can also do is minimize opportunism by the way the blockchain is functioning. I don't want to be too technical, so I'll skip that one. And the question is, okay, so are blockchains firms? Can we say that Bitcoin is a firm or something similar to a firm? And I think that the answer is negative. A firm, at least in antitrust, the definition is very clear. It was given by Ronald Coase in 1937, actually. And he said that a firm is a zone of vertical control. So you have one person on top of it. That person is giving orders, and that will allow the firm to save what we call transaction cost, and that's why we have firms. But a blockchain is different, especially public permissionless blockchain. They are horizontal form of governance, and therefore blockchains are not firms. They can be used by firms, but in and of itself, a public permissionless blockchain is not a firm. So those are two important reasons why I think we should care about blockchain. And in short, it leads you to this conclusion that blockchain is an infrastructure on its own. So this is the first part and what I wanted to put on the table. And now what I want to do, and I have 15 minutes left, is to see how two institutions may actually, instead of being in a confrontation with one another, could actually cooperate with one another. And here I'm talking about blockchain on one side and antitrust on the other side, and whatever comes behind antitrust, competition agencies, governments, policymakers, regulators, and so on. So here we go. First of all, I should say that all I'm going to say now is pretty much was published in the paper, published last May, entitled Blockchain Code as Antitrust, that I co-authored with Vitalik Buterin, who's the creator of a large blockchain called the Ethereum. And what we try to do is to see two things. First, how blockchain and antitrust could actually complement one another. And also, if they can, then how to do it, how to achieve that from a very practical manner. So first of all, I think it's important to underline that blockchain and antitrust, they have the same goal. To some degree, you could argue that the goal of blockchain is to decentralize transactions. And that's something that I see often when I read papers. I see some people saying that, well, because we have some mining pools or people coming together to orient the blockchain in a way, it is not decentralized anymore. I think to some degree it's more complex than that. A blockchain has different layers, and you may want to have a look at all of the different layers and to study the degree of decentralization for each layer. But at the end of the day, that's the objective. It appears clearly in the Bitcoin white paper, in the Ethereum white paper, and any other cryptocurrency that comes to mind, Stellar, Tether, and so on. They do say that they want to decentralize, but it's about the process. It's not about the end goal. And most people will be perfectly willing to say that blockchain is an infrastructure. And if on top of it, you want to put an application, let's say an equivalent to Uber working on top of a blockchain, if you have the best application, you should be able to capture the market. So in a sense, it is a decentralized outcome, but this is perfectly fine for the blockchain community. So I think this is sometimes something that I do not see very clearly. Having a closer look, here's how you can represent a blockchain. You may have seen that graphic, but I think it's worth exploring it a little bit. On the left, you have a centralized network or a centralized firm. So let's imagine Facebook or Twitter. They are at the very center, and Facebook or Twitter can do two different things. They can control your data. They can decide to delete your account in a minute. And they also are the only entity with all of the data, right? They have the data, my data, they have the data of my friends and so on. And I don't. To some degree, I can see the pictures of my friends, but I cannot access all of their data on Facebook. A blockchain is a bit different because blockchains are decentralized. And by decentralization, it means control. Who controls the blockchain? You could argue that no one controls the blockchain in theory, or that everyone does to some degree. But still, at the end of the day, although in practice it's a bit more complex, what you see is that indeed no one can actually take away your Bitcoin from your wallet. Or no one could say you are using Ethereum to put a smart contract. I decide to stop the smart contract. No one can do that, which of course will creates trust that I will explain, but also some issues because no one includes governments, right? So if there are some Bitcoin transactions happening, once they happened, it's impossible to undo the transaction. And that may create some legal issues, but also trust. And the blockchain is also distributed. And by distribution, it means the location. Where is the data? And for a blockchain, the data is everywhere on all of the computers of the people just willing to download a copy of the blockchain. Those computers are called the nodes, but again, I don't want to be too technical here, but I think it's important, especially when it comes to the value of data. If everyone has a copy of the Bitcoin ledger, well, that data does not have any value per se. It will be much different if just one person had the entire copy. So that is for blockchain. And now let's have a look at antitrust. And to some degree, I am very much aware that there is a debate in the field of antitrust regarding what should be the goal of antitrust. You may have heard that. If you do not come from the field, to be very dramatic here, you have some people saying, well, it's all about consumers. Those are the Chicago school, the Bork people, and some other people saying, well, this was the past, but now antitrust should be about all sorts of different things, including welfare, protecting the environment, fighting against racism, and so on. But I think regardless of the final objective that you want to assign antitrust, pretty much everyone agrees that it's also about the process, right? The process should be that companies should be free to put products on the market. They should be free to protect the environment if they want to do it, and so on. And so that, at the end of the day, is all we have in antitrust. What is a cartel? A cartel are two or more companies coming together, and when they do, they deprive the colluders from their ability to choose their own prices and behave freely on the market. So there is no competitive process between them. And if they succeed in their cartel, they deprive their competitors from behaving in a certain way because they have no choice but to meet the same price, follow the same practices, and so on. And the same is true for abuses of market power. What is it? It's simply a company doing something, depriving another company of its ability to compete on the market freely. So at the end of the day, blockchain and antitrust are about the process. They are not about achieving a particular result. That, unfortunately, I'd say, is changing in the field of antitrust with what I mentioned already, the NTC, DSA, DMA. But for now, at least, antitrust as it is applied, same in Europe, in the US, from my understanding, same in Brazil, same in many countries. It's about the process, and the same is true for antitrust and blockchain. So we see that they have the same goal. And furthermore, I think you can argue that they complement one another. And being very high level, here's why. We know that we detect very few practices, illegal practices when it comes to antitrust. There is this study. Actually, there are very few studies documenting that phenomenon. To some degree, I think it's really hard to document, but it will be great to have some academic work in the field. But here's one, not so old. We detect apparently between 10 and 33% of cartel since the World War II. I think the detection rate is even lower when it comes to abuses of dominant position. So it means that, I mean, it's not too bad, but it also means that potentially 90% of legal practices are not detected. So we know that antitrust can't do it all. And again, as I said, antitrust is about practices, one practice at a time, and it's not about, giving the big picture and ensuring that the entire industry can actually compete against another industry. Blockchain is the exact opposite. A blockchain, as I said, is an infrastructure, and that infrastructure does not care about the practices or the behaviors. Of course, the infrastructure will shape the behaviors in a certain way. We've heard, and to some degree it might be true, that blockchain may get rid of intermediaries. But if you want to use Bitcoin to finance terrorism, unfortunately, it's possible. It used to be, apparently in 2012, that 7% of all of the blockchain transactions were financing somehow illegal transactions. And now from 7%, we went to 1%. But knowing that there are, last year, I think 3 billion transactions happening on blockchains, all of them combined, 1% is still a big deal. And when we say that in a blockchain, we check the transactions to make sure we want the transaction before it is put on the blockchain, the only thing that is being checked is whether you are providing your public key, you are providing a valid public key to send the money away, and you haven't double spent the money already, the Bitcoin, the Ether, whatever that is. But the content of the transaction is not checked at any point. So the two are playing in a different level, and I think they complement one another very well. I wanted to discuss that one because I think it's a nice way to understand how they could actually complete one another when it comes to blockchain and antitrust in their fight, not against big tech per se, but against illegal practices implemented by big tech companies. So here's, and again, it's very, I create here a clear opposition between big tech and blockchain. In real life, it's more complex, and we have a good example. Facebook announced that in January of next year, they will put their cryptocurrency, now renamed Diem, on the market. So they are not always opposed, but to some degree they can be. A big tech as a pilot, right? We know about Steve Jobs, we've heard about Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. I mean, it's all we hear about those guys. It could be women. Unfortunately, it's much rarer, but we do have some examples as well. In any case, we have one pilot or a board of shareholders, and they can actually direct the company in a certain way. For a blockchain, it's not so clear who's the pilot. There are some passenger on the plane, which to some degree can influence the directions of the plane, but no one can actually say, I'm going to change the way Bitcoin function tomorrow just by myself. No one has the power to do that. So that's the difference between the two. And from that difference, you can actually see that competition will actually come because they can actually offer something different. Because you have a pilot in big tech, you can save transaction costs. Steve Jobs never argued whether or not it was a good idea to put the iPhone on the market. He probably said, let's do it. And everyone listened to that idea. So you save time, you save money. For a blockchain, you can also save transaction costs, but other ones, because you coordinate, but no one is actually in charge of making sure that the coordination is happening. It's just the consensus doing that. Going back to big tech, the fact that you have a pilot is a feature, and it's also a bug. It's a feature, it's a bug first, because we know from some survey, and this one is a survey that was conducted by The Verge, that 80% of the people not using Facebook say that they are not using it because they do not trust Mark Zuckerberg. not because Facebook features are not cool enough or because they dislike the color or whatever. It's just an issue of trust for those people not using it. And that, of course, you don't have on the blockchain, but you have another issue, which is the fact that there is no control or no official and vertical control. Therefore, if there is a bug in your blockchain, it's really hard to actually change that. It's possible, but it's hard. The trust issue, going back to big tech, is also something which could be great, because if you trust the pilot, then you could go one way, which potentially could increase the common good. And on the blockchain, you have trust and you don't have the trust issue. But as I said, it means that there is no control. So you see that the two complement one another. And to some degree, blockchain will take away some of the transactions that happens today on big tech. I think not all of them, but some of them. So to some degree, you could see how blockchain could help antitrust agencies in recreating the process of competition in markets which have been tipped already. I'm almost done. Here's something that I want to mention, though, and that'll be it for my presentation. What I want to mention is that, okay, I've been saying that blockchain is an infrastructure, or you could say institution, that it complements antitrust, and all that's so far so good, right? It's a wonderful world. We don't have to worry. We don't have to intervene. We don't need antitrust agencies, even you could think. And I think that will be a mistake because, as I said, blockchain is the infrastructure and antitrust is about practices, and the two needs one another. But here's the risk. I think that, and it's going to be extremely hard, but if we keep on applying antitrust in a way that disregards blockchain as an infrastructure, to some degree we may imperil blockchain. And the opposite is true. If the blockchain communities keep on developing blockchain without caring about the rule of law, to some degree they will get into troubles. Here's an example. That's the second case that was introduced last year in the United States, the second case of blockchain and antitrust. You have the reference down below, United American Corp versus Bitmain. Here's what happened. You have a blockchain, and it was the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. And within that blockchain community, you had two sub-communities. One community wanted to fork the blockchain because they wanted basically to change the rules of the games. And the other part of the community was saying, Bitcoin Cash is working well, we should not change any of the rules. And because it is possible on the blockchain, the community which wanted to change the rules of the game forked the blockchain, meaning that they copied the entire history of the blockchain and created another version functioning with the new rules. And that created two subversions, if you want, of the Bitcoin Cash. And I forgot the name. I think one was Bitcoin Cash ABC and the other one Bitcoin Cash SV or something like that. And that, to some degree, you could argue is competitive, right? Because it actually creates some more opportunities and some more substitute, and it's great for consumers. But here's the issue. In that case, the community which wanted to implement some new rules knew that it was too little compared to the other community, and they knew that no one, almost no one, will use their new version of the blockchain. So what they've done is that they went to China and they rented some computing servers there to have the computing power on their blockchain. And this will send a strong signal to everyone. Look, everyone is using our new version of the blockchain, where in fact it was artificial because it was just some computers that they rented for 3 weeks, time to convince everyone to use their version of the blockchain. So to some degree, this, you could argue, is anti-competitive. And we're going to have a court decision. So far, the claim has been dismissed, but it's not the final word. And I'm a bit worried. I'm not saying this will happen, but let's imagine that the judge, and in fact, in the way they draft their opinion, you could see that potentially they are not so acquainted with blockchain. It might be that they will say that not only that fork was anti-competitive, but that generally speaking, all of the fork are anti-competitive, right? They could reach that conclusion based on that case. And if they were to do that, it will deprive blockchain communities of the possibility to exit the blockchain and to create another version of the blockchain, which is very much a Darwinian process, which is something positive at the end of the day. So this is why, in my opinion, when we apply antitrust, we need to think about what is the infrastructure to which we apply antitrust in that case. I know it's going to be hard, and it's going to be especially hard because we have something which is called train incapacity. We all went to law school and we are told that we should apply the law regardless of any other constraints. And for the blockchain, it's the opposite. In most of the computer science classes, they have no ethics classes and they disregard the rule of law. So it may create an issue. Here's the last slide that I want to show you. Those are the numbers of blockchain litigations, generally speaking, have included cryptocurrencies, smart contract, and so on. As you could see on the left, it's just in the United States. The number is growing. In 2019, we had 135 cases. Most of them do concern Bitcoin, but to some degree, you see a shift, and we are moving away from Bitcoin to other issues. And here's the categories. Most of the cases are actually cases of civil matter. We could think that blockchain are used for criminal activities, and you will see criminal law enforcement. It represents only 35% of cases, and 80% of those cases are actually cases of civil matter. So for sure, the number of litigation is growing. It is coming to the field of antitrust. And again, I want to insist on the necessity to think about infrastructures and the pillars of those infrastructures in a way so that they can actually cooperate and not being opposed to one another, because I think it will be a missed opportunity. And this is pretty much all I wanted to say. Of course, if you want to read more, I've created this website where all of my articles can be accessed in open access. You could send me emails, but we have time for the discussion today. So again, I'm very grateful for that, and I look forward to the next speakers. Thank you.
Well, I thank you very much, Thibault. Fantastic presentation as always, and impeccable reasonings, I would say. Two things caught my attention very much. 50,000 papers, is that right?
On algorithm, yeah, algorithm and antitrust. And you know, the first time I done the study was last year. I went to a conference in Zagreb in December, and it was, I mean, it's almost 50,000. I forgot the exact number, but it was something like 44,000. And I've done the study a month ago, and we had 3,000 more papers in just a few months. So it's exploding. And the least we can say is that we don't have literature when it comes to algorithm and antitrust. And yet, do we see cases before agencies? A few here and there, but mostly it's about humans coordinating with one another and using computers to do their coordination. It's not about computers coordinating with one another thanks to machine learning and all that. So I'm not saying this is not interesting, but to some degree, we may spend too much of our resources studying algorithm without caring enough about infrastructure, whether it's blockchain or any other type of infrastructure, as a matter of fact. But this is, of course, personal opinion very much.
All right. So Nina, please take on.
If I may, I would love to start a bit of discussion with Thibault, actually, because I'm representing, as practitioner, I'm representing less the, I must admit, very exciting, more philosophical perspective that you took in your presentation, but I'm coming from the practical side, having, you know, clients sitting in front of me, actually wanting to realize, you know, these ideas that you just presented. And I don't really want to be a spoilsport, but to some extent, I need to at least a bit disagree with what you just outlined, at least on the basis of the current legal system. And we might agree then again upon our view that we might both believe that law needs to adapt and evolve. But based on the current state of affairs and based upon what is announced, at least in Europe, to being happening in the crypto space regulation-wise, it doesn't seem to walk into the right direction, unfortunately. So please don't get me wrong, but I try to outline what I actually see here. So you said infrastructure on its own. That's exactly the dream of the initial blockchain community. And that is exactly the reason why I got into this topic about 5 years ago. In the meantime, I must admit there is only a part of that left for me, because everything that happens is embedded in our current legal system. You can't escape from that. And I agree to you that most of the coders do not really care or did not really care, but start to care now as SEC pops up and other regulators pops up and the courts come up. And I wonder if you counted for alone, I don't know, 35 court proceedings going on in my office here, right? Because we are so deeply involved. We also see in our cases now court being involved. So I completely agree with your view. This will go up now. So we need to somehow deal with the existing laws. And that starts with the fact that whenever people start to collaborate, they do form something separate from them. We have an enumerative number of types of legal entities across the globe, at least in any jurisdiction I'm aware of. And if you do not choose a specific type of legal entity, then you end up in what I call the default entity. Any developed country has this type of default entity. And that means, at least in every country that I'm aware of, that you create something where everyone involved bears unlimited liability for everything that happens in that system. And this means that the public permissionless networks will never grow to industry scale because no industry user will ever be able to use them. So what we said instead is that people, or industries at least, start to explore the private permissioned systems, right? Which are then again very much close to, you know, the corporate governance, typical corporate organizational structures, which are not, you know, the ideal environment for blockchain networks to evolve. So the next step then was systems like public, still permissioned networks, which try to create a less hurting permission as possible, and recognizing the need to sort out your data protection schemes and also to some certain extent money laundering topics. Once you deal with financial instruments in a tokenized form, then you get at that stage that you need to know at least name and a contact, a way to contact the other one involved, right? So it cannot be completely anonymous as it is currently with a permissionless system. And you need to disclose how you actually deal with data, how it's processed, who determines what. And that needs to be transparently laid out in some sort of agreement, at least under European GDPR. So the least hurdle that any such compliant network must take is that you are aware of the identity of the persons involved running the nodes, so to speak. Plus, they need to accept certain terms of use in order to make that work. That, having said that, that takes a bit away, you know, the idea of having a network where there is no pilot, as you said, because if you create something like this, typically in the blockchain space, they started with foundations, which I believe is not a good idea. It's autopilot entity with a set framework and like the directors being king in their kingdoms, not responsible to anybody. So this idea gets more and more dropped. Now we see, like Libra, these networks being organized in associations or to some certain extent co-ops. That's, I think, a membership-based organization way better constituted for actually regulating such networks. But again, you know, if you're forming a formal legal entity, then you actually see a clear pilot there, even if they are determined just, you know, to set a framework, to organize in the less possible way the whole network, but it's still then existing. And the good thing is that the responsibilities and the controls are transparent in that system, because that's also some other thing I would like to mention when we analyze these networks, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. I wouldn't say that there is not a certain type of control here. It's what I like, it's a social media organized, informal entity, so to speak, right? It's not really true that there is not like a core group steering that whole thing. And I think once you admit that, it becomes clear that we need to make these actual powers transparent and not try to hide them away. So I'm very much in favor of making actual control visible. So that also means that trust is not created by mere anonymity and people agreeing to run you know, the same software code all together independently from each other, but it's rather the combination of a trustworthy technology run by trustworthy individuals or entities involved, which I now see evolving. But I think it could nevertheless reach the goal that you outlined. And now I want to give you the opportunity to to make your statement towards this. I would be interested to hear your thought, Thibault.
Yeah, should I, Eduardo, or should we give the floor to Ivo maybe? You decide.
Yes, actually, we can make it a little more informal. It's nice. Ivo can make an observation if he wants. I will make another one upon what both just said, abusing of my position as moderator.
I can make everything much worse if you want.
Yes, actually, it's aligned. When Thibault mentioned the digital architecture will impact society, I'm reading the, you know, it's a late reading, I must confess, but I'm reading that book, you know, Nudges from Tales and Sustain, and it reminded me, to call my attention to the, you know, this stuff, architecture matters a lot to economy. You know, within and without the digital realm, it's just that. Please, Ivo.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. Actually, I am already regretting that it's not going forward for a few months, because after everything I heard, I'd like to have a few weeks or months with them to discuss almost each phrase. So, but let me just put 3 points here, and I'll take advantage of two things. First, I'm an academic and a lawyer, so I like to think that I can enjoy both perspectives, and I'm also a lawyer and an economist. And I've been working with antitrust and software and technology for 20 years. And one of the first things that came to my mind when I was listening to Thibault speaking is, one of the things that I love about antitrust is that once you get the main logic, you can apply it to almost every setting. And we have been discussing for 20 years. So it came to my mind, the Microsoft case, and how people are terrified about what was happening there. And when they're discussing about control of technology and the impacts on commercial practice, I remember of Napster and how everybody was saying, oh, intellectual property is dead. And it didn't happen that way. And even internet, I remember when internet was becoming a good thing, and now you can figure out how gray is my no hair, is that internet would overrule national states and it would be out of control. And as a matter of fact, I firmly believe that we are heading to at least 3 different internets. You're going to have the American internet, the European internet, and the Chinese internet. And for me, that's mind-blowing. That's quite shocking, because I was expecting something else, and I was taught something else, and I thought something else. So when I think about what Thibault said and Nina said, what came to my mind is 3 issues that I think it might be interesting to hear them. I can identify 3 different issues for me. One is the limit of law itself, not antitrust, but law. What can actually be achieved with law and what cannot. So one of the things that people get a little bit upset about blockchain and some technologies is that they create the possibility of cooperation or interaction without full control or not fully under the shadow of the law. That's been like that forever. Everybody's always trying to do something at least partially outside of this control of the state, whatever the state is. If it's a kingdom, or the tribe, the Roman Empire, or the United States. So that's pretty much something that has been happening for the whole human history. Of course, and this is that the discussion is how much blockchain is actually going to work that way. And in this issue, I'm a little bit more toward Nina in the sense that nowadays we are so immiscued in controlling so many aspects of social life that nothing can actually work very well without have at least some adherence to law. So, and here comes a question for this first issue. Suppose that a national state says Bitcoins or whatever technology based on blockchain is basically illegal. What would be the value of that in that country? Right? That's just one issue. Just like Europe is now saying that you should keep your personal data inside Europe, otherwise it's illegal, and that gives you control. They do it, so they have it control. So this is the first issue. The second one is, I think we should separate the issue of anti-competitive practices that are associated with blockchain with anti-competitive practices that are the result of how a certain blockchain application is structured. And then you can, of course, look at blockchain either as infrastructure, just like a ski mountain. I love Aspen ski. So just like a mountain. Is it an essential facility? Was it constructed in an anti-competitive way? And then you can see it as a thing. And you can also see it, use it in an anti-competitive way. And in this sense, I would go to the example that Thibault gave, that those guys duplicated the blockchain registry and trying to convince people to join. Is it anti-competitive? But then it's a practice. It's not the thing in itself. So these are the things that I would like to bring just to heat up the debate a little bit. I have like 25 questions for each of them, but not enough time.
So I think Thibault may address Arnina, and then Andre can add some other questions. But let hear. Do you agree, Andre? Okay. Otherwise, yeah. If you have a very tough one, you can make it now.
Okay, I have 2 pages of notes, but I will try to be very quick. I'm not sure if we disagree, actually, Nina. So at some point you said that indeed, if you enter just blockchain, whatever that means, because there is no entry really, but if you use it or create one without thinking about the legal form behind it, I agree with you, will go in the undefined box. But and I agree that potentially policymakers and regulators will say then everyone's liable, and I understand all of the issues, but I think it shouldn't be, because if you are just using blockchain, do you have control? Can you prohibit someone else from using it for doing something illegal? You cannot. So you can assign liability if you want, but at the end of the day, can you assign liability with someone with no power to prevent the practice? I think potentially they will try to do it, but I'm not sure if that makes sense. It's different when you are the CEO of the firm, right? Where you could have said to your employee, do not do that. But so I agree, but I think this is where we need to think about how the way the technology is designed and our legal regime needs to match one another. Otherwise, it will create some issues. But I think it's probably indeed why we see more and more that governments and private companies are moving toward consortium blockchain. To some degree, I understand why, and there are some nice features. I also know that some governments are working toward using public permissionless blockchain still, so we'll see. I do believe that, and I've read a paper where they called public permissionless blockchain FAT protocol, because everything that you build on top of it will actually benefit the layer 1, and that is something that you will not see in a private blockchain, or at least much less, because you can actually screen the entry. So I think the two will survive. We'll see which one will be adopted, but so, and as for Libra, I think it's very interesting. Now it's called Diem. They keep on changing the name as if we will forget all of the issues. I think it's interesting because the association creating the cryptocurrency is indeed composed of 30 companies, but the company running the wallet you will need to use the cryptocurrency is Facebook, and it's a legal entity, 100%.
Not anymore.
Sorry?
Not anymore. It's not permitted. It will not be permitted. I can jump into that later. I brought with me some slides about the proposal for the market in crypto asset regulation in Europe, and specifically that will be permitted. It will not be permitted. They must open up for several wallets in a fair and transparent manner. That's one of the provisions they included.
Okay, but for now, all they say in the white paper for Novi is that they want to be the only company, right? So, I mean, of course, they will have to change that, but this was the idea. So, I mean, the fact that there is an association, I think, may hide something else behind that. But we'll see. But in any case, as for so I very much agree with you as well that there is control. It's not true to say there is no control within a blockchain. All I'm saying is that it's not vertical control. But I agree with you that there is a core. And in fact, I wrote a paper arguing that for each blockchain, if you have a specific looking at certain criteria, you will identify a group of users and they pilot the blockchain, but still it's not pilot the blockchain as a company, right? Which can actually change the rules easily and all that. But still they have some power over there. So yes, I agree with you for that. And as for Evo, I think, I mean, to some degree, isn't IP dead? I mean, you could say it's not dead because people register patent and can enforce it. But I mean, if you listen to music, how many people have downloaded movies and music illegally, right? So, I mean, it's not dead, but it's not the same as what it used to be. That's
right. But billions and trillions of euros are still going back and forth in this industry. It's not dead, it's just different.
Yeah, no, of course it's not dead. But if you look at the number of the industry and the money the music industry is making, for instance, for a long time it decreased before they thought about Spotify and all that. So, and it's also changing the business model to some degree where they do, more open access stuff. So, I mean, it's not dead, but the least we can say is that it actually changed what IP is or the way it is used. And to some degree, blockchain might do the same. I mean, it's clear if you read the cypherpunk in the 90s, they were saying we're going to escape the rule of law because we're going to hide, and it's going to be impossible to find our identities. Now it's not possible to do that. But the idea of Satoshi was to say, well, we will escape it because there is no control. And that is something, when I went last year to the MIT, where the Bitcoin Foundation is located, and I talked to the people there, every time they were saying to me, we do not want control. So if we do that, if we implement such a change, we will get control over the blockchain, and we do not want it because control equals liability. So I think that's a very interesting issue. And to some degree, we may still assign liability without control, but this is something to consider. You mentioned then the limits of the law. I've listed a few. It seems to me that our ability to detect what's illegal is a clear limit. And if 90% of illegal practices in the field of antitrust are undetected, then it's a limit. Sometimes we have mutually unfriendly jurisdictions. It's really hard to enforce a contract if you go to China and vice versa. So that's another limit, cross-borders application of the law. I think another one is our understanding of practices. If you do something illegal, but the legislator or the regulator does not understand, it's also a limit. And another one, and I think that's the greatest limit, is our ability to design stuff. I think to think that we can just, a group of people can actually design an infrastructure, a bunch of regulators, I think is a mistake. The Darwinian process has to play out and we'll see what emerges. But that, I think, is another limit. And that's where blockchain could actually complement the legislators. And the last point, I very much agree with you as well when you say there are basically some anti-competitive practices that are just using blockchain to actually implement the real space. And there are those which actually are blockchain itself. And some people have been saying that a blockchain should be per se illegal because it's a bunch of users agreeing to a consensus, which are the rules of the game, which is a cartel. Of course, the question is it an illegal cartel? Because if it benefits consumers, it's a bit more complex. But that issue, when it comes to fork, will come back. We're going to hear that, look, it's a bunch of users. They've agreed to the same rule. They form the cartel that way. And if we say that it is illegal when it's one of the pillars of the infrastructure, we will endanger the infrastructure. And I think it's something we do not want to do. So the way I see it in the future litigation, it's going to be central to be able to analyze this is a practice which has nothing to do with blockchain itself. And this is a practice which is actually because of it, blockchain exists. And if we do not make the difference, it's going to be a nightmare. But yeah, and looking forward to hearing about the MICA also, that kind of stuff.
Let me just try to help Thibault's side a little. Actually, the usage of the technology against technology, or the technology itself to convey a new set of rules. Because when we mention evil accurately detected this, what is the ability of the law to regulate this, right? And I have an answer, actually, I believe. The law is not evil at all. So if we try to apply a dogmatic standard, traditional standards to regulate to this type of phenomenon, I don't know, I have a plane passing on. So I would like to pass the word to Andre, because we, in the beginning of this year, we had a very nice opportunity when I met Nina, recall Nina, that we discussed blockchain applied to, open banking and ecosystems or API stuff. And I was impressed about the ability, of course, with some adaptations, the ability of this technology to help us avoiding anti-competitive problems like discriminations and like access and so forth and so on. So, and I discussed this with Undersecretary Andre and other colleagues from the government in Brazil. And let's hear a little bit about what Andre thinks about it, and if he has any reasoning or comment to place to, hot a little bit this discussion. Please, Andre, thank you very much.
Good morning. Do you listen to me? Thank you, Gaban, for inviting me for this event. I was thinking about Evil's questions, and there's a principle, an ancient principle that says that the obstacle is the way. I think everything that you put in the path of innovation transforms innovation. law is usually reactive. We see we see some behaviors and try to limit them and negotiate to become then a behavior that we agree with and that's social acceptable. But every time law tries to anticipate innovation, we find some problems. So I think it's a cycle. There's technological transformation, it changes behaviors, and law reacts trying to put some limits in this transformation. All the cycle turns around again. It's not only with blockchain or this technology or this internet technologies, but with all technologies we developed along the human history. Television, radio, telegraph, press, all these technologies became part of the cycle, and we try to, we are still talking about limits to the press, limits to internet, limits to what a lot of day by day technologies are trying to impose. So think about the use of blockchain in this relation with open banking and PICs. That's the point of our discussion, my discussion here. I don't know if you know, Brazil is implementing two big transformations in the financial sector. One's called an open banking. You open databases to public use, for private use, and there are criteria for doing that. And PICs is a platform that allows institutions and organizations and people to make transactions in a way that is very, very revolutionary. And blockchain can be the way to make it grows and make it build trust. So, but I think that the fundamental issue is in this regard is the criteria for defining access. If who controls access, who defines this criteria, and how it can permit or not the introduction of restrictions on competition. I think the whole point of the discussion is that Ivo was talking about the fragmentation of internet, China internet, or American internet, and using thinking about blockchain in this way, it's about how public, how free can it be, or if you're using restricted criteria, how your block talk to other blocks. And so I think the whole point is that help me, Gaban.
Okay, well, let me just give a special thanks to Nina. Nina made it a very great effort to participate in this panel. I insisted because I know her importance to make the counterpoint upon her knowledge about blockchain and non-romantic knowledge, I would say. Nina, thank you very much for coming. And if you allow us, I will share your presentation with the audience afterwards, because it's really nice. And I thank you very much, Nina. I hope we can keep touch, and please feel free to jump in at any time and to exchange ideas. Thank you very much, Nina.
Thank you very much for the invitation. All the best to all of you.
Still, as Andre helped me, asked for my help, I would, if I may, Thibault and Ivo, I would propose a simplification of the questions. We have, I believe we have a very difficult task to face. And I started this discussion in the first panel with Matt. This challenge has a name, the ownership over the ecosystems, right? So we have it's not a problem, but a effect, right? The digital ecosystems, they are owned by groups. So there is an owner, or there are owners, and these owners, they have incentives for rent seeking and to extract profit and so forth and so on, in the traditional standard of the shareholder value, right? No one doubts. So, and there is an owner for each one of the assets we have in the world today, so as in the financial sector. And this idea of open banking came in from the UK and then implemented in other places, and Brazil is trying to do it. And that's what Andre mentioned. This is a very same problem. We have an oligopoly in the financial sector, and I doubt it would be easy to break up this oligopoly into a pulverized competition, right? Or to bring more alternatives to consumer of financial services, in a broader sense. And one of the issues to bring up competition to ecosystems that I learned from Thibault's papers and other professors' papers, researchers, and case law, not much from the US, but from the EU, that is facing much more this problem, the core problem of access and to the ecosystems is the API, right? So we have APIs, we have problems of discrimination within and inside and outside the ecosystems, and we have problems. I doubt the solution would be breaking up these ecosystems into a lot of smaller ecosystems, right? But we do have this proposition from the Democrats in the US. And this conference will face this. We have a panel bringing the Austrian school to discuss this proposition of breaking up big techs, okay? But we have some problems, and I think blockchain may bring us an alternative to face these problems, but not using the traditional legal framework, but using a new set of language, combining programming and legal provisions that can work more effectively, or can address more effectively this discrimination, access, and so forth and so on problems. So this is pretty much what I think Andre tried to ask, right? And to ponderate better place in this. And maybe this is something that I'd like to hear from you as well, Thibault and Ivo.
Would you like to go first or me to go?
No, you can go. You wanted to say something regarding the Democrats, right?
No, not the Democrats. I wanted to say something about Eduardo's comment, is that about API and taking the presentation from Thibault. The problem with blockchain is that once a feature is imbued in the system, and if the system is big enough, even a later antitrust remedy that would say, listen, the blockchain now has to be able to implement this API in such a way that it does no longer constitute an antitrust problem, might be completely impossible, because it's different than regular software. In the regular software industry, what we do have, as Thibault said, we have control, we have a vertical control. So I can have a new version of Windows with an open API. I can have a new Netscape. I can have, nobody knows what Netscape is anymore, or well, but you know, you can have a navigator, an internet navigator, and you can change the API because the software is not logically connected with the structure from the beginning. That's not true with blockchain. Once you create the blockchain infrastructure, and the whole idea of it is that it cannot be fundamentally changed by anyone. And that's the beauty of it, that's the usefulness of it. And that's an interesting, Thibault, antitrust challenge. So I have no problems with competitors cooperating to make a blockchain, because that's what about standards, and in intellectual property industry is full of this, like Blu-ray, 4K, etc. The problem is, if ex post we find out that the blockchain, whatever you do over a blockchain, is anti-competitive, you have to kill the whole thing and start over. And that's a challenge. That's a little bit different from what we've been discussing before. And that's the point that I wanted to raise based on your comment.
I mean, my first paper when I wrote about blockchain and antitrust was exactly about this issue. And I was saying, maybe you're going to find a way to identify the participants. And then what do you do? If there is an issue in the infrastructure in itself, that's it. I mean, you cannot go to one person and say, now you change your blockchain this way because it's anti-competitive. And to some degree, I think we're going to have to find a balance, because it is the reason why some people will use blockchain, because there is no pilot, or at least a few pilots, but not clear ones. But if you have no pilot at all, then it's a massive issue. And for me, it's why, and I will try to tie what was said a bit before, but it's why to some degree I can see why consortium blockchain are so attractive to some businesses, because they can actually control. But I mean, at the end of the day, a few years ago when I heard consortium blockchain should not be called blockchain, I thought it was stupid. And the more it goes, the more I think it actually makes sense. It's a new infrastructure, but I mean, it has only blockchain as a name. There is a pilot, and there, indeed, you could ask one person, change the rules of the game, this will be possible. For public permissionless blockchain, it won't be possible. So you could think, well, let's only use consortium blockchain. But if you do that, you go back to the trust issue of 80% of people not using Facebook because they don't trust the pilot. So I think this is not the solution. And I mean, the point that was made, I think, by Andrea was, he mentioned the willingness of the lawyers to be before the technology. I mean, we know that we are always lagging behind, and it's not great. I'm not sure if we are too far ahead, if it will solve the issue, because the technology will actually, find a way out. And so I think the whole idea of future-proof law is stupid. I mean, I cannot think about any other word. To think that you can actually regulate what will happen in 20 years. I mean, no, you cannot. But, and I think for me, but I'm curious to hear your opinion, for me, the key will be to find a way to incentivize blockchain communities, here talking about public permissionless blockchain, not to embed the law, the entire competition law and IP and data protection within the blockchain. It will be super hard, if not impossible, but to embed the possibility, if needed, to then apply the law. Of course, in exchange for something, because why would they do that if you just, some of them will do it, but if you, in exchange, you create sandboxes, legal safe harbors, economic incentive, you will convince most of the communities to implement that possibility to apply the law when necessary, not in advance, because we've seen the movie Minority Report and Inception. It doesn't work to prevent things. But when the thing happens, we want to be able to apply the law. Otherwise it will be an issue for those public permissionless blockchain communities. They say the number one reason why investors are now investing more money is because there is no regulatory certainty, and they want it. So they are asking for that. They are asking for regulators and policymakers to work with them. The way I see it, this will be one of the solutions, but you may disagree.
Well, I can't disagree with the concept, but I wonder how much practical it is, in fact. Meaning, because the idea here is, okay, we have this blockchain structure, we're gonna incentivize people to put some leeway to change it if in the future law requires it, or an antitrust remedy, something like that. As a concept, is just perfect because you're supposedly, allegedly, including flexibility into the system. However, from a technological perspective, it seems to me that it's not feasible, in the sense that if you do that, somebody has to have the power to change. And to have the power to change, somebody has to be in control. And the whole idea of the blockchain is to take away control. So I'm more and more, I'm not abstractly against the idea. I'm just wondering whether or not it's technically feasible to do it without destroying the concept in itself of a blockchain.
Yeah, but if I may, from the very first paper Thibault written on blockchain, and then this blockchain code is Antitrust, something that I just started to think about is the solution may not be inside the chain, but outside the chain, and then we can regulate it. Because if we manage to regulate the exchanging of the token, for example, outside the chain, right? Or creating some obligations for the programmers inside the chain, we may end up having the solution of authorship problem, right? Because one of the issues raised by people that are against blockchain usage is that you may create a thing that you can commit crimes without never allowing the identification of the author, the authorship dilemma. We can address the authorship dilemma combining a normative solution outside the chain with a programming solution inside the chain. Is that right, Thibault?
I mean, for sure, outside the chain, and that's what we've been doing in Europe, where we say if you want to exchange your token into fiat currency, let's say euros, you need to disclose your identity if you want to do it using an exchange based in Europe. And so that creates an incentive to behave in a certain way within the blockchain. But of course, to some degree, you could go first to an exchange based in Russia, and then you don't have to disclose your real life identity. So there are ways around it. And it's not perfect. So within the chain, I think we're going to have to think about it. I think we're going to see, and it would be great to test that. And I think this is why we need sandboxes to test whether it works and the willingness of the communities. But the spectrum for me is giving the power to one government to intervene within the blockchain when necessary. And there indeed, I mean, you could say, well, then the pilot is the government, right? So that's one extreme. The other extreme is to say, if there is an issue, let's say we see anti-competitive practices, then we have the mechanisms to submit the entire community to a vote. And that community could say, okay, this smart contract was illegal. Let's all agree to fork the blockchain without the smart contract, which is technically possible. And in between, you have lots of different mechanisms, ratio and votes and things that I think, and I don't have the perfect solution, but I think are worth trying. And writing with Vitalik and talking to the people in the community, I was surprised, to say the least, that they are willing to work with regulators, because the thing they told me, and that's stuck to my mind, is that they do not want to be Uberized, but not Uberized in the sense of the sharing economy, Uberized in the sense of putting a product on the market and then being told it's illegal. So they are willing to work with policymakers, but I think we need room to try which mechanisms will work best, which one they are willing, where they are willing to give power away, where they are not. But technically it's possible. It's possible to put, for instance, backdoors into every smart contract where you could stop the smart contract if there is an issue. But indeed, if you haven't put a backdoor and you put a smart contract, then it's too late. So I think this is why we need to care about those issues right now. There are 50 million smart contracts operating on the Ethereum blockchain. It's a lot, but it's also nothing, right, to the number of contracts in the outside world. But if you look, it's growing. It might disappear, but again, 3 billion transactions last year, and it's going this way with the decentralized finance. So I think we need to think about those issues now and engage in a dialogue. And I mean, I know Nina was not too happy with the direction we are taking in Europe. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I think we are going in the direction which is great, which is to first understand the technology, seeing the technology as something which could be positive and not only a way to finance terrorism, and trying to regulate it to the best. But I mean, to me, it's clear that at the end of the game, it's a geopolitical power game between the US, China, Russia, and Europe. China now has their fiat currency on the blockchain. The US submitted that to the US Congress during the summer, and in Europe, we are working on it. So it's going to be about, I think at the end of the day, if you do not create the proper incentive for the blockchain communities to work in your territory, they will go to Russia, they will go to another space. And for that, I see room for Latin America. And I think what I've seen in Brazil is also very encouraging. So it's a race not to the bottom. I think it's a race for the common good. So I'm more on the positive side, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you have seen this, but we have a nice question raised from Jessica Nemeth. She's asking for all of us actually, if we are aware, are you aware of any real attempt of using blockchain to oversight antitrust commitments by regulators? You know, it's an interesting question because actually I can answer. I've never seen this before. I've never seen it. And I believe there could be, and there could be infringement, violations, offenses, but I've never seen it.
I mean, sorry, I was muted. I supervise Jessica Mass' thesis, so I know she knows my answer pretty much. So maybe Ivo, if you want to go.
Right, well, first of all, it's important to know that although antitrust is a kind of regulation, it's not done by a regulatory agency in the sense that you have a body that issue rules and etc. Normally, it goes with a litigating agency that issues some guidelines. So it's natural not to have antitrust regulation from agencies this way. And it's too early to have them because actually we don't have enough, as Thibault said, we have 1, 2, 3 cases here and there are much more about actual practices than about the structure itself. So far, there is no disease, and without the disease, there is no need for a vaccine. What we do have, and I think that's Thibault's message, is that this is a great thing, and it might change a lot of things in a deep way, and we better start thinking about it right now. And I think that's just fine.
And I mean, if I may, continuing on this idea, I know potentially Nina wanted to talk about the MICA, which is the new regulation that has been proposed in Europe to regulate not all blockchain, but more of the cryptocurrency side of it. And let me give you an example of why this will also impact antitrust and competition, and in the end, the common good. If we do say that a token is a security, instead of just an utility, then it comes with lots of obligations, right? You have to disclose, you have to follow, to fill the forms and so on. And I understand why we want that. But if you do that, it means that if tomorrow I want to create a blockchain and to put some token on the market for free, I can do it. But before I have to, make sure that I notify that to the European Commission because it's a security and so on. So my willingness to do it might be reduced. So now I think we may want to say, okay, it's a trade-off and it's a positive thing and it's okay if we have less blockchain. Why not? But I think we need to think about it because that's the way Bitcoin started. Bitcoin at the very beginning was giving away 2 Bitcoin for free, just anyone just willing to take them and to put them in digital wallets. And that, to some degree, I think it's the reason why you may see blockchain competing with tech giants way more quickly than what we may expect, because they can actually create a willingness for you to join the blockchain just for the fact of getting the token for free. And then you realize the service maybe is not too bad and you start using it. So financial regulation will impact antitrust. I'm not saying antitrust should be over financial regulations. I'm just saying the two goes together and we need to think about it from a very broad perspective. But again, the OECD is doing a great job. The World Economic Forum is doing a great job in the field. And to some degree, I think we start thinking about it in terms of infrastructure and not just one practice at a time. So again, it goes in the right direction in my mind, but there are lots of questions to say the least.
Sure, but again, my only quick comment is that as far as I know, regulations are about applications, but not about the technology in itself. So yes, cryptocurrencies and this kind of stuff, but not blockchain in itself. So it's not about the platform. That's the.
Yeah, indeed. So far, they have been neutral toward consortium or public permissionless blockchain. But it might be that in the way we apply, in the way the courts and agencies apply antitrust, it may impact the infrastructure. There is another case in which Tethers, which is a big blockchain, was saying that their token was actually a stable coin, which means the value was linked to the value of the US dollar. And they were saying that. And then eventually they stopped doing it. So they just put some new Tether on the market, without saying that they were not actually correlated with the value of US dollar. But because people thought it was, they were trying to acquire those, and it created a bubble. And eventually people realized, well, it wasn't linked to the value of the US dollar, so they tried to sell all of the tokens they were acquiring. And in the end, the bubble was $450 billion worth of value. And now they are asking for, litigation, treble damages. So it's huge what they are asking for. And so depending on what the court will say in that case, you may see some impact on the infrastructure, in which they would say you cannot put token on the market so easily. You have to change the characteristics. So, but yeah, so far nothing on the infrastructure, but it will be impacted one way or the other, and we need to think about it from above, I think.
Thibault, is this case related to that Libra Facebook coin? No,
so that blockchain is called Tether. It's called it's spelled TETHER, and the exchange, let me check, I think was I forgot the name of the exchange which was involved, but in any case, it's an ongoing case that was introduced in December of last year. So it's a new case. I forgot the name of the exchange, but it's there. It's Bitfinex. So that's the exchange that was involved in the process, and the blockchain was Tether. So it's one of those new cases. But again, I mean, for now we can actually count those cases, but eventually it will become, like cases in the field of antitrust against tech. It will be hard to keep track of all of them.
All right. Well, I answered that there. I haven't noticed a case of using blockchain to oversight antitrust. In Brazil, I doubt. But we do have some cases, some samples, very few, I must say, of usage of using technology. I mean, smart contracts or like technology to violate the law. What is very different, I must say. And why? Because if I learn accurately, the blockchain technology can be used in many ways. And a way that we are seeing here in the country is to refer transactions, just that. So just like a public notary, right?
So, I mean, yeah, on that, I haven't seen any case in which the agency would say that's the remedy and you have to put it on the blockchain for us to be able to track. But to some degree, there are lots of governments using blockchain to do something a bit similar. The list, it will take forever to go through the list, but it involves Canada, Mexico, the United States, Argentina, Brazil, Denmark, Italy, the Netherlands, and so on. And those countries are now, all of them, using blockchain to ensure transparency when it comes to public procurement procedures. So to some degree, I wouldn't see why, if there is a case in which, bid rigging in the case of a public procurement, they couldn't say, well, we have the technology ready, so now you have to do the bids using that blockchain. I think it will come probably from what exists already outside of litigation, and they will plug the litigation into it, rather than just saying, okay, let's design something for the first time to see if it works. But it's just a guess.
Yeah, well, I think we are reaching the end of our panel. If there is no questions for us to answer, I would like to thank very much Thibault's presentation, Ivo, and they just sent me a message that he should leave the panel to start another commitment in the Ministry of Economy. And I would like to thank you all for your audience, this very distinguished audience, I must say, many non-professors, people interested in the panel. Thibault, thank you very much. Ivo, thank you very much for your time. And I invite you all to stay on the webpage. We will have another panel on 11 to 20 minutes in the future, tackling tax and innovation, tax and bureaucracy as the main hurdles or obstacles for innovation. Okay, thank you very much, my friends. See you soon.
Thank you, Eduardo. Bye-bye, Thibault. Very nice meeting you.
Yes, I hope in person soon. And thanks again for the discussion and the comments.